Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you, gentlemen.
Hi,
Good
Abby.
morning, Abby.
Hope you're doing well today. And everyone watching, hello to you too. My name is Abbe Udochi with the Eldercare Alliance, and I'm here with my friends, Ariel Rosenzweig, Paul Doyle, and Jay Heinlein, and they're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. I am a geriatric care manager. I own Concierge Healthcare Consulting. We are a geriatric care management practice, um, and we work with families who are managing difficult elder care issues. And we're going to talk to you today about a really interesting topic, planning and decision making. But before we jump into that topic, I'll ask my friends here to introduce themselves.
Hi,
Jay, how about
everybody.
you?
My name is Jay Heinlein. I am the president and owner of Synergy Home Care of Westchester. We're a licensed home care agency, and we help families in southern Westchester County and in the Bronx with their personal care, companion care, and homemaker services. And we are located right in Scarsdale, New York.
Good
Awesome.
morning, everyone. My name's Ariel Rosenzveig. I'm managing partner of Eli J. Rosenzweig and Associates. We practice in the areas of elder law and trust and estates, as well as tax, mediation, and employment law. We're based in Elmsford, New York, and we service New York and New Jersey.
And hi, I'm Paul Doyle. With my wife Susan, I own Oasis Senior Advisors of Westchester and Fairfield County. We help families navigate senior care. So we connect them with the resources they need. We have a specialty in finding the right assisted living and memory care solution. But a lot of our time is spent connecting them with other resources like the other boxes on your screen.
Great. Thanks, guys. All right. So we're going to dive into a topic the four of us talk about together all the time, and that's planning and decision making when it comes to elder care. So we're going to dive into creating a plan and why that's important before a crisis hits, advanced directives, so all the legal instruments that you might need in order to help your elder care journey run smoothly. We'll talk a little bit about Medicaid versus Medicare, which is usually a confusing topic for people. And then planning in place versus moving into a senior community. That's definitely a question that I get a lot when I talk to clients. But let's first jump into why it's important to create an elder care plan before a crisis hits. And I say all the time to my clients that you can create a plan in the midst of a crisis. You can create a plan at any time, but when you do it in a crisis, it might cost you more money. It might be more stressful. You might not be able to gather all the facts and come up with the most effective plan, but it is never too late to plan. Doing it in advance, though, can generate more opportunities for you to create plans that are more effective and don't cost as much. So why don't I throw it out there to Ariel first and ask him, what's your thinking about creating an elder care plan during or before a crisis?
Yes, so this is a very important point. People often avoid these issues. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with mortality. They certainly don't want to deal with elder care needs. About 50% of Americans have any sort of estate plan, while 100% of Americans die. And most Americans, about 75% of Americans, will need some sort of care as they get older, and almost no one plans for it. The best time to plan for various reasons, including asset protection and Medicaid, is in advance, as everyone here in all the boxes, as Paul noted earlier, uh, everybody will, you always want to plan in advance. Now, when there's a crisis, you have time to think about it. You have time to consider your options. You have time to protect more assets, which is a lot of what I do. Uh, Advanced planning is critical. That being said, if a person didn't plan in advance, which is most of my clients, there are ways to plan in a crisis situation. People don't like to deal with it unless the goings get tough, and that's the time when most people come to us. And that's the time. There's still time to plan. It's never too late, and that's important for people to know as they go about their care needs. It's best to do it in advance, but it can always be done, contrary to what a nursing home might try to imply in terms of how when you can protect your assets and when you cannot protect your assets. but that is definitely ideal to do it in advance.
Awesome. Thanks, Ariel. Jay, how about you? Why don't we bring you into the conversation? So it seems like it might be difficult to plan in advance in the home care space, but how do you create an elder care plan before there's a need?
Right. So yes, you're right. It's a little trickier in the home care space because truthfully, people in their minds, whether they are or are not, feel that they're independent and that they don't need any help. So to put a home care plan in place before it is really needed or it's going to be accepted can be challenging. So we focus in on establishing the relationship. I can say probably within 10 minutes of conversations I have with families initially, I'll know whether we are going to be able to help them if they need help. But we continue the conversation because what I really want to do is I want to establish a familiar and trusted relationship with the
Yeah.
family so that when and if the situation ever changes, they have already, whether they know it or not, they've already moved a little bit closer to knowing an agency that they hopefully trust and feel comfortable with. Um, and we go as far as even when we know that a family does not necessarily need help right away. Maybe they still are independent, and maybe it's the adult children that are pushing for some kind of in-home support, but the parents aren't ready for it yet, or maybe they are still independent, they don't need it. We'll still go if they feel comfortable with it. And in person, we'll go set up a meeting and introduce ourselves. Because during that conversation, we've now created a little bit of a familiar relationship. We'll be able to talk about their situation, what's going on now, and maybe are there little tweaks that will keep them safer at home and independent longer. So we
Yeah.
focus on establishing the relationship so that when a situation changes or a crisis happens, they have a familiar, trusted agency to go to.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about your agency, Jay, because I think you and your team are really easy to work with. When it comes to elder care planning, with my clients, it's always one of the things that I advise them to do is if there is no need for home care right now, there's likely going to be a need in the future given the trajectory of your loved one's health. So understanding the agencies in your area and doing some interviews and some meet and greets and making some decisions about who you might want to work with if there's a sudden hospitalization and you need care at home following that hospitalization quickly. If you have a relationship that's already established, you can turn it on faster than if you didn't. You don't have to do the research in the midst of a crisis, right? You've already established those relationships. So
And
I
just to
would agree.
interject a little bit, Abby, I think that's
Yeah,
why you're so good at what you do because you do get those thoughts in a family's head so that they realize there are options.
yeah,
And you avail them to that. And it's no probably different for you, Paul, right? Because in the same situation, people may not need to move right away. But knowing you and Susan and having the Oasis name in their, old school Rolodex is critical for when that situation changes.
Well, yeah, and we take a very different approach than a lot of people. Our basis is education, not pushing one option over the other, because all of these care options are so bespoke. But to piggyback on something that Abby said, it is a bit about options. It's a lot about options because the later you do planning, doors or avenues are going to close to you, and those can have a variety of impacts. If you open a door, it may prolong lives or quality of life for a longer period of time, just because you put in some care. And it doesn't mean, and I think Ariel hit it, the sense of mortality or that I'm committing to things. But this is any of the things we're talking about, whether it be geriatric care management or legal planning or home care. It's really just about learning what's out there, and it's a supplement to your lifestyle. And that's what we're looking at a lot about is lifestyle. And I think for us, broaching the idea of assisted living or independent senior living or a change, that's the biggest step anybody can take. And very few people end up taking it. But when you look at it, what you've done is you've set the goalposts and you know what's out there. And then we start to educate the family on, okay, if not this, what you may want to look at is this is what home care looks like for you. Did you know that there's such a thing as a geriatric care manager? Beyond, yes, I know you have a will, but do you know what other sort of legal stuff you should be considering and what messes you may be predestining yourself to by ignoring these? We can have those conversations if we're not acting in a crisis. If we're acting in a crisis, we're just solving the problem. And that's fine, but you're going to have more options, more flexibility, and probably better outcomes.
Yeah. And Paul, I would imagine that for a senior advisor on senior living, that I would think that people are probably planning more so in advance when they're getting to you, right? To try to source those options, and they've done some thinking. They're not necessarily in the midst of a crisis. Is that right? Would you say that, or am I
I wouldn't,
mistaken?
no, I wouldn't say so. I think there's a continuum. I think that, we get plenty of phone calls from the hospital at Friday at 5 o'clock because there's going to be a
Mm.
discharge. Okay. And
Yeah.
that's no planning has been done.
Yeah. And they're
And
not going to be discharged to rehab. They want to be discharged to assisted living.
or home or whatever they want,
Yeah.
but or you're being discharged from a rehab and it's sudden because that's just an insurance decision, really.
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
happens tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a
And they
24
exactly.
can, they're
hours,
not ready to
48
go home
hours.
yet. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's about finding resources. So whether we call Jay and say, "Hey Jay, I need somebody tomorrow," uh, you know, Jay's got a great company, but it may be a difficult job for him. The caregiver I have is at the other end of the county. We can't get them there tomorrow, or we can't get in there tomorrow. Or if you're looking for an assisted living for a respite stay, just to rebound a little bit, the one down the street from you doesn't have availability, or the one that does the particular type of care, or that your aunt was at, or that you've heard good things about, just isn't available. And that's a shame, that's the reason you're not getting what you want, it's because you didn't think they had.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. You mentioned a few minutes ago, I wanted to pick up on it, like legal vehicles. You might have a last will and testament, but do you have a power of attorney? Do you have a healthcare proxy? Have you thought about protection? Those things are really important for any elder care plan, any really good elder care plan. You really have to have these vehicles in place when you're caring for an elderly person. So, Ariel, can you teach us a little bit about why these things are important and people should pay attention to them?
So I think absolutely. So I think if someone were to say, what is the first thing that I should do in terms of my estate planning, whether you're 30 years old, 80 years old, 100 years old, whatever, would be making sure that you have proper advance directives, the healthcare proxy, power of attorney. Now, there are people think, oh, there's a few misconceptions. One misconception is, oh, that's my wife, that's my husband. In sickness and in health, of course, I can make decisions. If they're sick, they're my spouse. I've been married to them for 70 years. Of course, the doctor's going to listen to me. Of course, the financial institution's going to listen to me. And the answer is no. We don't know. And I've seen lots of different matrimonial dynamics where sometimes one spouse doesn't want the other spouse making decisions. So it's not a given. And you need to have very particular authority to make those decisions. And a lot of people get their power of attorney, if they have one, from the real estate attorney that closed on their house, or from a jack of all trades type of attorney who does a little bit of trust and estates and a little bit of real estate and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And what happens is that you have a power of attorney, but that power of attorney is only as good as the authority vested in it. So if that power of attorney does not give specific authority for elder care related issues, and there's lots of different types of issues that we consider when drafting these documents, well, then you can't do them. There are many instances where we end up with an incapacitated person where the family had a power of attorney, but they need to go to guardianship court anyway because it wasn't good enough. It wasn't expansive enough. And then you end up getting everybody involved in a court experience that no one wants to experience. First of all, it creates family drama. Secondly, you're bringing a incapacitated or potentially incapacitated person in front of a judge, and you don't know what they really understand and what they don't understand. And sitting in front of a judge where everyone's talking about how smart you are is not an enjoyable experience. So these are really things that people have to think about ahead of time. And it's the first thing people are like, oh no, I need a will. You do, but this is more important. Because it's while you're living. That's the most important piece, that you're taking care of the way you want to be taken care of.
Yeah. So, I have these clients right now who I'm trying to refer to you actually, Ariel, and they are really concerned about their about the reaction of one of their parents. They're afraid really that reaction is going to be strong and overwhelming, and they're going to feel like bad kids because the parent thinks that these vehicles, particularly the power of attorney, is going to be represent him giving up his rights and his autonomy and his authority in his own life. And the kids are very tentative in really explaining to him that the power of attorney really is a conversation with you and your lawyer and talking through your wishes and then appointing one or two people who are going to uphold your wishes if that should ever become necessary. So coaching them through that conversation has been challenging because of all of the kind of emotional stuff that are between the kids and the parents in this family. So while it seems, I think, logical for every family, every elderly person to have this, there's also this family stuff I think that can get in the way.
And I think please go ahead.
That is sort of the paradox here, is that you touched on, that people are afraid that they're ceding power or control.
Control.
But they're actually ensuring power and control.
That's right. That's a good way to say it. Really good way to say it. Yeah.
And ultimately, that goes back to your emergency conversation, Paul, and everyone else that has kind of contributed to that. And what we're really talking about is maintaining somebody that wants to maintain control and independence and bringing in resources that enable them to do that in the way they want it done.
And I think there's also the piece of letting them know, firstly, you can always revoke this, making it clear to the older person that they are the client. We send the kids out of the room when we have this conversation, at least certainly for the signing, typically for most of the conversation, if not all of it, letting them know that this is their decision. And it's also to let them know that, this is for when you need help. Obviously, it can be a durable power of attorney where someone can help you even where you don't technically need it. But you can always revoke it as long as you have the capacity. And if you don't have the capacity, your choice is having a loved one help you with the explicit authority that you indicate in the document, and not more and not less, and making sure that it's them and not a judge, which is not only not what you want. I would imagine you never met that judge. You don't know them. They're not a good friend of yours, and they're not your child or your spouse. But the judge is also a very expensive process. And do you want your kids to be able to go to the bank and pay your bills and take care of your care? Or do you want them to need authorization every single time they need to do anything? And that's your choice, because most people at some point need help. And it's a difficult thing to face, but it's important.
But we face it. It's funny because I think we do face it, not to trivialize it with analogies. We face it throughout our lives. And I said, three of us have eyeglasses on. Okay. And
I have glasses in my car.
What was that decision like, though? Like, how many of us put them on the moment we needed them? No, I'll just squint. I'll hold the book closer. I'll get some readers. I'll do whatever because I don't need that. That's a weakness. It's something. There's a flaw in me.
Yeah.
But the moment I put them on, my life improved. I read more again. I had that enjoyment. I knew what to order in the restaurant, didn't just fake it, that kind of stuff. And I think that whether it be that or hearing aids, walkers, bigger things like legal documents to put these things in place. We need tools to get us through life. And if you don't adopt those tools and use those tools, then you do it at your own peril.
And you're also, Ariel, you said something that really hit home, and that is a loved one, a family member, somebody that you're familiar with, typically, not, I mean, there are these other situations, but typically somebody, a loved one, is going to help you. And by putting the appropriate documents in place, you're choosing to make that easier for them rather than more difficult. We had a situation not that long ago where we were helping a wife of a couple. The husband was the power of attorney. He had all the right documents in place, but unexpectedly, his health turned. And instead of putting appropriate documentation in place for another person in the family to help, he passed away, and suddenly the family needed to help the grandmother, and they didn't have access to do it. Now, we were with them, but it took this family person, I'd say, 6 months to go through guardianship just to gain access to the bank accounts and the funds that were there.
Ah,
And, and her life was miserable doing it. Now, if the appropriate documents had been in place, that would have never have taken place. So you choose to either make it easier for your family or more challenging.
yeah, yeah. That's a good example, and it happens far too often, unfortunately. And it doesn't have to happen. So I think part of our mission is to educate people, as many people as we can, to help them avoid these really complicated, risky, difficult situations with some forethinking and some planning. Nobody wants to plan in this space, but it's really important that you do, and that's a really good example. That's a really good example, Jay. You're like an uncle, like wise and voice is soothing. I'm going to start calling you Uncle Jay.
I think it's the beard. Pass me my pipe.
So another big part of planning is financing elder care. I get questions like that all the time. And I don't know that we'll be able to go into all the ways to finance elder care today, but one of the major ways that people finance elder care is the use of their insurance. Right? So Medicare funds some aspects of elder care, like home care. Medicare will pay for home care and other things. And Medicaid will also pay for some aspects of home care as well. So let's tackle home Medicare for the first minute, because that's probably going to be the easier part of the conversation. Who here takes Medicare reimbursement or can, or do you work with communities or doctors who accept Medicare or other professionals? Jay, do you accept Medicare in the home care space?
Let me just clarify your statement a touch, and that will in Medicare does not cover long-term home care
Right,
situations,
right.
right? So they would cover very specific situations in the short term. If a person is getting discharged from a hospital, a rehabilitation center, and they get approved for it, then there are things called skilled nursing services where they would come in and they would approve the person for, it could be ADL service, home care, personal care service. Usually people know that as home health aid service.
Physical
So,
therapy, occupational
yeah,
therapy
therapies,
at
but
home.
that's usually for a very short window of time.
Yeah.
Typically, call it about 20 days or so. Medicaid, for people that financially qualify, can and will cover long-term home care community services. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
We do not, as an agency, we do not accept Medicaid or direct payment from Medicare, but we absolutely do a lot of supplementing, especially of the Medicare, because typically if somebody comes out of a hospital or rehab, their needs, their direct care loved ones' needs are greater than in the home care space. What, I guess a Medicare service may give them 4 hours or 5 hours up to 5 days a week. And in a lot of situations, they need much more support at home than that. And then, so we end up supplementing that Medicare. But we always are asking families, because financially, we want to make sure that they're taking advantage of any of those support systems that they can, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah.
One follow-up to Jay, it's also very hard, from my experience as an elder care attorney who does a lot of Medicaid planning, it's very hard on the Medicare end to staff those cases. So they're getting the hours, a few hours a day for a few weeks, but then they're not able to staff them, and then you have a problem. So it makes it so much more important to have a backup, have a supplement, because
Yeah.
sometimes that supplement is all you have.
Yeah, great point in that we do what we call a concierge service, which is kind of a transition service for families that are getting discharged from a hospital or rehab. But I can't tell you how many calls we get from families that have been approved for Medicare and a service at home. And they've got the nurse coming in, they've got the therapies, as you mentioned, Abby, coming in, whether it's physical, occupational, right, speech. They've got the therapies coming in, but the part that's really challenging is getting the home health aide in there. And that's the part that is critical for their kind of day-to-day feeling good about themselves. That's helping with their personal care stuff, the showering, getting dressed, getting ready for the day. So we get a lot of calls from that, from families saying they're not showing up. We need somebody. Can you come in and help?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Abby,
when I work with families who have been discharged and they want their entitlement kicks in for Medicare, it's usually 5 days a week, 4 hours each day, and it has to be the same 4 hour shifts each day. And you're absolutely right that sometimes those shifts are hard to fill because they're short hour. Sometimes what I do with families is connect them with an agency that will take both Medicare reimbursement and private pay and maybe even Medicaid so that they can string hours together. So they can supplement with private pay if they're able to those 4 hours that Medicare will pay for. Maybe they pay for another 4 or 5 hours a day. And suddenly they've got a case with longer hours that's easier for that agency to fill. So that's sometimes a solution that can work for a family if they're able to manage it.
Yeah,
And
Abby,
so,
just
absolutely a great
for the
solution.
clarification on, you were asking about the clarification of Medicare versus Medicaid. The way we explain it mostly is that, Medicare is a health insurance, and it's basically by prescription. The prescription may be for rehab, it may be for rehab in the home, it might be for pills, but that's what you think about. The doctor gave me 30 pills over 30 days so that I might get help in the home for a period of time to this end result. It's not, to Jay said about long term. That's the key. It's not for long term. It's for short term, a fixed and finite bit.
right, it comes to an end.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it also had that what we see a lot is that people don't understand the type of Medicare that they have. And if you ask social workers in hospitals and skilled nursing, they may not say this in public, but when you come in later in life with Medicare Advantage, the limits of that type of policy impacts the type of care or the length of care that you're going to get. And you need to know that. And that's why we recommend to people that they look at their insurance annually in that open enrollment period, because your health need changes. You're 65. Yeah, Medicare Advantage makes a lot of sense, and it works. But as health
And it's affordable. It's more affordable for people.
Exactly, but at some point, your health needs, what you're asking of the system, would demand you to move. It would suit you better to move on to a different policy.
Yeah. And if it comes to a point where, those other policies that give you more choice and are a bit more liberal in the way that they approve benefits is just not sustainable or not affordable for you, potentially Medicaid is an opportunity to explore. So doing Medicaid planning again in advance is important. Ariel, you want to talk with us a little bit about that?
Sure. So
Okay.
uh, Medicaid planning is always a good idea to do it in advance, for the reason that in New York, while it is the most flexible, state in the country when it comes to elder care planning and asset protection. So, if you want the weather, you go to Florida. If you want the financial protection, you stay in New York. But
I want to be in New Jersey. What do you get there?
I live in New Jersey. You moved to New York. But there is a 5-year look back period for institutional Medicaid. And then there's right now no look back period for community Medicaid. There was a law passed to implement even a 2.5-year look back period for community Medicaid or home care, but that has not been implemented yet. It's unclear when or if that's going to happen. Possibly later this year, possibly next year. They've been delaying it each year for the last 5 years. It's unclear. But so ideally, you want to plan at least 5 years in advance. So this way you cover institutional Medicaid as well, because everyone says, well, I never want to go to a nursing home. Sometimes it isn't a choice. Sometimes you have to go to a place like that. But it's also true that most people who are properly maintained at home don't end up needing a nursing home. Or in another senior living setting. So if you want to make sure or do your best as a human to avoid going to a nursing home, the best you can do is make sure you're properly maintained outside a nursing home. So that's where you want to make sure that you do proper planning, not only for institutional planning, but also for community Medicaid, where right now, as I mentioned, there's no look back period. But we always want to anticipate institutional. What happens if, like most of my clients, they need care now? In whichever setting we're talking about, community or home care versus institutional, there still are options. Even where there is a look back period, you can still protect assets. It just triggers a penalty period. So if the nursing home tells you, well, after you spend down all your money, you'll get on Medicaid, that is true, but not the optimal choice often for the applicant, for the potential resident of that facility. There are ways to qualify for Medicaid with a penalty period, which means you can protect significantly more than just the amount below the Medicaid threshold, which is what the facility wants you to do, because that means you're going to spend more on private pay. So there are options, ideally in advance, but can also be done even in a crisis situation. And it's also important, kind of in a situation, kind of as we discussed, home advanced directives, power of attorney, and healthcare proxy. People are like, oh, I don't want to give up control. You have, again, there is, it isn't easy. None of this is easy. It's not easy to think about illness and mortality. But if you're going to do it and you want to protect your assets so that you're not paying it to a nursing home unnecessarily, you want to empower your children, empower your family members so that they can help protect you. So it's more autonomy for you, because at the end of the day, if someone were to tell you, do you want to leave your money to the government? Do you want to leave your money to a nursing home? Or do you want to leave your money to your kids and your family or the people you care about? You'll probably choose the latter. And that's, it takes time for people to come around to that. But the earlier you come around to that, the better off you typically are.
I think part of the stumbling block, I think, is that people who do see Medicaid planning as the equivalent of Medicaid application. And I think if used properly, you're doing the Medicaid planning, as Ariel said, 5 years in advance. It doesn't commit you to going to Medicaid. It doesn't commit you to going to a skilled nursing facility. It doesn't commit you to anything. It just gets your ducks in a row so that, again, to Ariel's point about what are your wishes? What did you want to happen when you needed care or you were towards the end of the life? And you've teed it up. So there is stuff that's put aside for grandkids' education or to help with a house or to leave legacy or whatever. But even somebody as good as Ariel is going to have a tough time maximizing that if you come to them and you're in the direct application mode.
Yeah.
And that's what we tell people. This is an insurance policy. You purchase, hopefully you did, likely you didn't, purchase long-term care insurance. Nowadays, it's not as great as it used to be. But any kind of insurance is you're planning for a crisis that hopefully will never occur. And that's what I view elder care planning or asset protection planning as well. You're creating a plan so that you could potentially still provide for those other things that you want to provide for, whether it's graduations and weddings and things like that. But at the same time, protecting your assets, hoping for an event that will never occur. And it's a one-time investment in the process, hopefully. Sometimes there's follow-up, but it's an investment in a process that will almost invariably pay dividends. But if you're really lucky, and it never does, because you don't need any care, and you're like the people who call and say, well, my father died at 107 in his sleep, and I will too. And I hope that is the case. Then you invested in something you never needed, kind of like any insurance policy, hopefully you ever purchased.
Yeah. But
And
having
that's
that
how I view it.
protection provides peace of mind too. So
Absolutely.
you're not worried about it. You mentioned long-term care insurance a minute ago. Would you advise that people purchase a long-term care insurance policy? Okay.
Yes, but if you want to get a policy that is at all reasonably priced, you're going to do it early. And the other thing is nowadays, it used to be when I first started practicing a long, long time ago, there were people who came to me with unlimited policies, lifetime, full benefits, and I'm like, wow, that's great. Now the insurance companies all got a lot smarter, and also they were losing their shirts on these policies because everybody was needing care. If you're selling a policy where 75% of adults are going to utilize it, you're probably not actuarially sound. And that's what happened with a lot of these insurance companies. They all got out of the business. They're like, this is not worth it. And the companies that stayed in it started developing different models where there's hybrid policies, whole life, um, whole life, and whole life, forgive me, my phone was ringing, I apologize. Whole life and these hybrid policies where there's a long-term care component to the policy, uh, and and those are also more expensive. I don't sell insurance. I can't speak to you about the specifics of these policies, and it's not for this conversation. But there's also long-term care policies but they're much reduced. They're limited in time duration. They're limited in dollar amount per day. So very often the people who have these policies still need to be thinking about the other planning to supplement it, because a policy that covers $200 a day is not going to cover the $650 that a nursing home can cost, or the $450 that a home care can cost. So these are issues that need to be dealt with. That being said, if you qualify even for those policies and they are reasonable from a financial perspective and based on your budget, it is a good idea to have, because if you ever do need care, it'll reduce the amount of exposure of your other assets
That's right.
to cost of care.
Yeah, I like long-term care policies. I have one myself. I have one of those hybrid policies. I do revisit it every year, probably every 2 years, but I revisit it frequently enough. Got it when I was in my 40s. So, no illness and, I had and age enabled me to get a lot of the stuff I wanted for a lower price point. And I say that to elder care clients a lot, who are caring for their parents. If you don't have a long-term care insurance policy, you really should talk with a broker and investigate one for yourself, because you just really never know how the dice will be thrown for you and your health long term. And long-term care can, as you say, help protect at least some of your assets by supplementing. Jay, I don't know if you take long-term care insurance policies. I'm sure that you do. And Paul, I mean, all of the assisted living communities accept long-term care. So it's a good idea to have.
Yeah, well, it's part of your plan, right? This goes back to the original question. In the mid 60s, when Medicare, Medicaid were signed into law, the average lifespan of the American female was 74. If I told you somebody died at 74 today, you'd say, oh, so young. And it
That's
was
true. We would.
and the system was designed to take care of seniors for their lifespan.
Yeah.
Well, if you retired at 65 and lived to 74, it's a 9-year window. That difference between lifespan and health span is so increased that you need to ask yourself, what is my plan for that time when I'm not healthy?
Yeah.
Is it going to be straight? I'm going to rely on Medicaid. I have long-term care, I'm going to self-insure. I'm going to put a little bit of money away. I'm going to use my house. But you need to have the full conversation of what have I allocated for my care.
Yeah, that's right.
I
And
think people don't.
if you're a family caregiver, and you're caring for your parents, I say this to clients sensitively as well, unless things are drastically different, you're making different choices over this course of your life than your parents did, that potentially is a direction that your health may go. And so how do you want your children to respond? What assets or resources will your children have to care for you if you should need that care as you age? So it's an important part of the planning, Paul, as you say.
Well, and you, Abby, you and Jay, I'm sure see this a ton, is that the other piece is the human resource. My daughter is going to take care of me. That's my plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we need to have that conversation. And we also need to know what that looks like. You guys, how often have you had an adult child who put their hand up to say, I'll take care of mom, come to you in pieces because they underestimated the task?
Yeah.
At least 50%.
Yeah.
Paul, it's so
People come in the
interesting because
door.
that's one of the first points that I focus in on when I'm having the conversation with families, especially the adult children. And I try to be careful and, as you said, Abby, sensitive and professional in my approach to it. But I always want to make the message clear because I point out that typically it's the adult child or it's the person, the family caregiver that breaks down first. And that this is a moment where thinking of your loved one, you also need to think about yourself because your life is about to change dramatically. And generationally things have changed, right? Because now there was a time where families lived in multi-generational homes, and I see a little bit of that trend coming back, honestly, but not to the same degree that it used to be in past generations. There's too much geographical separation. Right before we started this conversation, we were talking about our kids and how they're spread all over the United States. So you have geographical separation, you have dual incomes now. Do people work? And there's just not as much time, but you still want your loved one to be cared for.
Yeah.
And that's the critical part. And it all goes back to the appropriate planning and trying to maintain as much dignity, respect, independence, and control for your older loved one.
And I wanted to make a couple points on that. Number one, more often than children taking care of the parents, it's spouses saying, I'm going to take care of my spouse. And I've seen countless cases where that was the case. And they came to our office and they're like, no, 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 we're not going to do anything now because if they get sick, I'm going to care for them. And then they did. And then the spouse got sicker than the person they were caring for because it's just too much. It's less likely for that to happen with children, but there's burnout. There's also things you forget you're going to end up doing for your parents that are just very difficult emotionally. So being able to be there for your parent, but also having the care in place can be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah.
The other thing people don't realize is how expensive life is and care is. And that goes for all of us. I'm sure, Jay, you could speak about what it costs to have an aide 20 years ago versus now. And everything changes. And as time goes, everything is going to get more expensive. Care for a person could be easy $250,000 a year. You're talking about two spouses. For a lot of people, that's unfathomable. So you really want to think ahead of time as to how you're going to do it, to Paul's point, so that you're not having burnout among the family, and you're also maintaining quality of life and dignity and respect and all those things.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ariel. It makes me think about, I've learned a lot from clients over the years as I've been doing this work that I love so much. And people want to care for their loved ones for various reasons, whether it is what's accepted or the norm in a particular culture, or it's just an obligation that they feel that they have to see through, um, or it's that there is no other, or they feel as if there are no other choices. And it can be expensive, not just financially. It can be expensive emotionally. It can be expensive physically. So that I think leads us into the last part of this conversation, and that is, when is it good for people to age in place, and when is it good for us to come up with other options? I'm sure we all have this conversation with families all the time, when the matter of, moving mom or dad into a community comes up, everybody thinks, or not everybody, but a lot of people think of, nursing homes of old, and putting people away, or getting rid of, or throwing away, or casting aside elderly people who need extra care that can't be handled at home because it's just not safe for the person who needs the care or the person who is providing the care. So how do people know? And those many of those myths I think can be dispelled just by visits, by tours, by going to see, by contacting a professional to talk about options, as opposed to assuming that no, that's not something that I can do or afford. It might be something that you can do. The places might be great, or might be good, options as opposed to home, and there might be some affordable options. So I'll throw that out there to Paul, since he's our
Well,
our resident
but
senior advisor.
writ large, though, I would say I'm going to parse words and say, so aging in place is this slogan that people have as for this desirable state. And I would say to you that rocks age in place. Okay. And that's not what we're going for. We're trying to thrive. And so it doesn't matter what we're talking about out of home or in home. If you have, Abby, you going in and helping a family, that's one thing, but you have the impact on the lives that you do. And maybe you suggested that Jay and one of his caregivers come in and help a little bit. But if those are the only pieces to what they have, that's a base level, right? Have we talked about enriching the life and making that life putting that person in a position to thrive? So we're making sure that beyond that, that family members or neighbors or other activities are happening to keep this synapses firing? Or are we just relying on, Jay's got some terrific caregivers, but if you're relying on your mom's, psychological, mental, and physical health on one person who's showing up as an hourly worker, that's selling mom short, I think. And I think that whether we're talking about at home or finding a community, it's all the same thing: is what are we doing with the whole environment in which we're living, and what tools do we bring in?
Yeah, I would add on when we go in very open to a scenario. When we first start talking to a family, we want to get a better sense of what is going to be the right next step for this particular situation. And to do that, we need to ask a lot of questions. We need to listen to what they're telling us. So we want to know about their goals and their wants. Then we go in, as an agency, we go in and we do what we call a home assessment. I have my nurse go in and we're evaluating not only the person, the direct care person, right? The cognitive, physical level. We're also evaluating the home environment from a safety standpoint. We would like to, as Paul said, keep people at home and age in place if that's the scenario for them. But it has to be in a safe and appropriate way. And it's not always the case. And that's why I have to say, just to step back a little bit, I really appreciate having the three of you as resources for me and my families, because as much as I want us to always be a solution for a family, we're not always the right solution. And so it may be that because of a physical or financial reason, staying in that particular home or home environment isn't the right. And that's why we're going to then introduce them to, maybe it's you, Abby, or to Paul, to show them even more options, because ultimately we want them to be independent, safe, and happy, because
Yeah,
that's how they're going to thrive.
right, right. Yeah. So, I have a number of clients actually who have chosen to stay at home. And then I also have clients who've chosen a community. And I have a couple of clients who have had to transition to nursing home care. But ultimately, wherever they are, families and they themselves want to make sure that they're safe, that they're well cared for, that their assets are not being ruined, that they're in a place that is affordable, where the people are caring for them, and where their lives don't shrink, and they have engagement, they have activities. They have intellectual and emotional stimulation. All of that continues to be important as all of us age. So making sure that to the extent possible that one continues to experience as much of life as possible. And then where can they do that in a place that is safe and healthy for them? And sometimes it's at home, sometimes it's someplace else.
Right. I mean, we look at it as just part of the evolution, right? When you got married, you got an apartment together. You're gonna have families. You sort of get the starter house. You raise the kids in this big house. It got too big. You downsized. Now, again, we're living longer, so that next phase of our life is, I want to be active. I want to do things, but my knee's getting a little balky, or somebody's got a little cognitive impairment and just needs a couple eyes on. I don't want somebody in the house because she's pretty independent, but I'm afraid she might walk out the front door, or make a bad mistake. We were talking before about leaving the stove on, things like that. And so we look at what that environment is. Do I make, as Jay said, modifications either in personnel or physical modification of the house, or to find another place to live, that is my apartment, is my home, and that services my needs.
Right. And, since we started this conversation because we wanted to talk about planning, just as you are going to survey the home care agencies that are in your area and have some initial conversations so that you've got someone to go to when you need it, look at what assisted living, independent living, memory care communities are in your area, nursing homes are in your area, so that you can just tour them and see what they look like, understand what they have to offer. That way, if the need should ever arise, you're prepared to pivot quickly if you should ever have to do that, right?
Because all these facilities have different personalities, right?
Ideal.
All you've said it so
Yeah,
many times, and you're not locked into anything.
that's
But
right.
you have a little more information. And so when and if the situation changes, because this is an evolving and fluid situation.
Yeah.
We'd love to keep somebody at home if it's appropriate for as long as possible, but we are well aware of the fact that the situation changes, and that's why we're involved with our families, and we are always checking in with our families, the direct care family members, our caregivers, to keep up on what's happening there, and is this still an appropriate situation? But, you know, they should have more information is the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
Absolutely.
thing we find is, clients who we've worked with to do planning, those who were proactive enough to do that, over time they'll call us. We become, and we all become, resources. And they'll call and they'll say, okay, this changed. What should we do? And there's always, throughout that process of aging throughout life, there's always steps in the process where you want the guidance, you just don't know where to turn. The advantage of proactive planning is also now okay, these are people who know this space. They know who to talk to. They know who to refer me to. And so that throughout that process of making these decisions, whether it's visiting assisted living facilities or independent living facilities or other senior living options, or the potential for home care, even if it's a few hours a week initially, where you don't need a lot of care, you need someone, a companion, or you need someone to manage medications because they're not doing such a good job, or doctor's appointments. You have these steps where you can call on the people that have helped you to begin with, and pick their brain and touch their network. So
Yeah.
I think that's important as well.
I think that's a really good way to close us out, Ariel. Thank you for that.
My
Um,
pleasure.
Yeah. So I always enjoy I always enjoy talking to the three of you, whether it's as a group or individually. You always have, I think, something valuable to offer to the conversation. So thanks to everybody who stuck it out with us for this time, talking about planning and decision making. I am Abbe Udochi with Ariel Rosenzweig, Paul Doyle, and Jay Heinlein. We are the Eldercare Alliance, and we are here when you need us for all of your planning and other elder care needs.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks,
Thank
Abby.
you,
Bye-bye.
Abby.
Here, everybody.